But I was pretty confident about everything until I showed up on race day. Has anybody ever run the Causeway Run? You've done the Causeway Run? We've got multiple people who've done the Causeway Run. So y'all might be able to relate to this. This is a different type of sermon that I do frequently. But when I got there, I showed up, and I went to the little registration thing, and they gave me the little the number on, and I clicked it on and everything, and then they told me to go to the starting line. The starting line was a long ways away from where I actually got my badge. And when I got to the starting line, I don't want to offend anybody, hopefully that picture's not in there, but I thought I was relatively early, and there were people lined up at the starting gate ready to run like 30 minutes before it was even going to start. And these were people that were kind of pushing and shoving and moving their shoulders and trying to get in the very front, because when that gun went off, or however they started, I don't even remember, they were ready to go. That's when I realized I'm not winning anything. I'm not going to do anything. Because these were individuals who were runners, and they were ready to run right when it took off. And so right behind those guys, then there was the rest of us. The eager beavers were all in a pile, and then there was the others of us behind, who we were trying to do our... There's Chip. All right. Glad you're here. So that's where I was at. I'm not a runner by trade, by any stretch of the imagination, but we were all like moving our arms and stomping our feet, and we weren't really stretching, but we weren't like... We pretended like we knew what we were doing, but we really didn't know what we were doing. And we knew that the people in front of us, who had been stretching since like 6:30, were going to beat us. They were going to win. And that was a kind of the group right behind these guys. And then there was another group behind us, and I put here in my little notes, they were in quotes, they were the runners, but they weren't really runners. They were individuals who probably hadn't ran very often. They weren't. They were going to run. I mean, that was their goal. That was their intention. But I'm not sure if they ran the entire thing. But they were going to start. They were ready to get going. Their intentions were good. But I don't, and I'm not judging anybody, I don't think they were physically preparing themselves to run. They were out to participate. And then mingled with that crowd and a little behind them were the walkers. When I did it, and I don't know if it is this way now, it was a 10K run and a 5K walk. And so the walkers were separate. And these were clearly people who walked regularly. I think they were stretching, not so they could run and do really well, but so they wouldn't pull a muscle, as they walked rather briskly along the way. They were ready to give everything they had, but they probably weren't going to win the race. But they were going to go all out. They were going to do the best that they could. And then, and I have some other pictures, but I decided I'm not going to show all the pictures. But I'm going to skip ahead to, you can see some of the pictures. This is the Causeway one. I just took some stock photos from their website. But then, and some of y'all might remember this, I remember this clearly, there were walkers with baby carriages. There were walkers with coolers and drinks to partake of before, after, and during the race, from what I saw. They were there not for a race. They were, and I put them here, they were there for an outing. It was a Saturday morning. They wanted to just be out for a stroll. I'm not sure how many of them finished the race or the walk, but they started, and they were going to have fun, and they were going to enjoy the journey. And then once we started on the race, you can kind of see the way things go here. I could tell there were some other groups of individuals also. These were the onlookers. And there were people on a lot of the sides that were cheering us on, passing out water, encouraging us, saying a lot of good things to us. But I think they were happiest because they weren't the ones running. They were just encouraging those of us who were trying to run. And then there was another group of onlookers who really could care less that we were there. They might have given us a quick glance, but they just wanted to get along on their way. And then there was a few of a third group of onlookers who were not happy that we were running that morning. Who were not happy that part of the bridge was closed. Who were not happy that streets were closed. Who were not happy that they had to be diverted in different directions or had to wait a long time while literally thousands of people were running. I'm not a mind reader, but I heard the words they chose and the hand signals they gave and the shrugs and the looks that they gave, and I knew they were not happy with us as we tried to run. Now, some of you may think, what does this have to do with anything, and why is your title about run? Because I was reading a passage earlier this week from 1 Corinthians. And if you're taking notes, now you can wake up and pay attention. Yeah. This passage, I have a daily Bible reading book that I'm not sure if Myra gave it to me or my parents or somebody. But it's an ex-football coach, and he has a lot of really, really good analogies here. So when I read this, I thought about the race. And this is 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 27. Paul is writing to the church in Corinth. He's writing to a group of Christians. And he says, do you not know that those who run in a race all run? And I'm going to pause there for a second because he probably didn't see the Causeway run, because a lot of people didn't run. But back then, they didn't have those things. He says, but one receives the prize. But then he says, run in such a way that you may obtain or win the prize. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and I bring it into subjection, lest that when I have preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. What Paul is doing is he's making an analogy, partially in a race and partially in a fight, to our Christian journey or to our Christian life. And he says, run as if you want to obtain the prize. Run as if you're in search for an imperishable crown. Run not with uncertainty, but run with a purpose. Run with a goal. Run with a desire to win. And that's what he's saying. He's saying run to win, fight to win. But he's also saying discipline your body. Other versions say bring your body to subjection or bring your body under control. And the idea is we take control of our body. And now he's not referring to a physical race, but he's talking about a spiritual race, a spiritual journey. And he says that he himself, I'm doing everything I can to win. Another version of verse 26 says, so I run straight to the goal with purpose in every step. I fight to win. I'm not just shadow boxing or playing around. He's saying, I'm giving maximum effort. I do everything I possibly can in my Christian journey, in my Christian walk with God. And that's what he's encouraging us to do. As he gives this race example in our lives, he's telling us we should try to win. But the benefit of our spiritual race is it's not a competition with each other. It's not like one person wins and the rest of us lose. I put in there, this is maybe a bad example, this race is like an elementary field day, where everybody who participates in the race and finishes gets the prize. That's the race that we're in. And as we're in that race, as we're in that Christian journey, I'm not trying to beat anybody, but we're in this together. And so my question, first of all, this morning, is are you running the race? Are you a spectator or are you a participant in the life of a Christian? Are you trying to live the life that God wants you to live? Are you wanting to live the life that God wants you to live? And if you are, then you're running in this race. And if you're running in the race, are you putting forth the effort to win? Are you the type of individual that's at the very front of the line, pushing, going, doing everything you can? Are you the type of individual that's buffeting your body to prepare for the race? Are you the type of individual that's putting your body through training to prepare for the race? Or are you going through the motions? Are you enjoying the stroll of life? Are you giving maximum effort, or are you not? From the story that I went over, there are those who are desperate to win the race. They train hard, they work hard, they jostle for position, they want to win. And then there are some who run like they want to win, but there's not really maximum effort. There are those who join the race, but they're definitely not disciplining their body. They have good intentions, they want to do what's right, but they're casually going through the motions, not real concerned with whether they finish the race or not. They're more along for the ride. But then there are those who never get into the race. The onlookers, who may cheer, who may be indifferent, or who may be outright belligerent. These are the people who never accept Christ. And we're going to come into individuals who are outright do not like the fact that we're trying to live a Christian life. I don't know, I listen to sports talk radio a lot, and I don't know if I should say names or not, but I was listening to a guy named Colin Cowherd. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him before. But he was making a comment about how he criticized athletes. And then he said, but I really feel bad for criticizing Andy Dalton. And he said, I feel bad for criticizing Andy Dalton because he's just a good, all-around person. He said, I think he's a Christian. And he said, and I feel bad for calling him, I guess his nickname is the Red Rifle, and he said, I call him the Red BB Gun. Because he just didn't have that it factor. And he said, but I felt bad. He said, and he was saying this on his radio show. He said, those people who believe in God and they're just good people. And you just want to root for them because you like them. And the person that was on the radio with him said, oh, does that mean you want to go to church with me on Sunday? And Colin Cowherd said, no. I'm never going to set foot in a church. He said, I don't set foot in a church and I don't set foot in an Arby's. I don't know what those two have to go together. He said, I respect those people who go to church because I can see it in their lives. But you're never going to see me in a church building. And I thought, why? If you can see in other people's life that they're good people, that you care for them, that you want to root for them, why would you not join them or at least be interested in looking at their lives and why they do what they do? But again, and I'm repeating myself a lot, are you running? Are you trying to win? Are you trying to be the Christian that God wants you to be. I found this very interesting. In that article that I was reading, it says the Greek word for race in this passage is agon, or I guess that's the way you pronounce it. And that's the Greek word that we get our word agony from. So when Paul is saying, and I thought about this the other day too, because we were talking about races and we talked about running, and Petey said, if you see me running, you better run too, because I ain't running for fun. It's not like I'm enjoying myself. I'm running for a purpose. Because a lot of people, we look at running as difficult. It's tiresome. It's agonizing. It's stressful on our bodies. And that's the whole idea that Paul is trying to get across to us. The idea is it signifies a match or a race in which endurance and determination must overcome those moments of difficulty that come in any race. If you've ran a 10K or if you've ran a marathon or a half marathon, I've never done those, but there comes a point in time where you're just tired. You just feel like, and you know it's not that big a deal. If you want to stop, you can stop. If you want to step out, you can step out. And I say all of that because I just happened to run across, and I don't know where it is in my notes, I happened to run across that in 2000, it was on the Political Press website, that in 2015, 3,300 people registered for the Causeway Run. 848 finished the race. And my thinking is there's a lot of people with a lot of good intentions that wanted to start the race, that wanted to start on that Christian journey, that wanted to do what God wanted them to do, but there's a lot of people along the way who just give up. Maybe they weren't prepared for the race. Maybe they didn't have the motivation for the race. Maybe they were just for the fun of it. But Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 24, verse 23, he who endures to the end will be saved. And in Matthew 10:22, second part of that, I didn't put this one first because he's specifically talking to his apostles, but he says, but he who endures to the end will be saved. Same thing. Jesus says it twice. Why would Jesus use the word endures? Why would Jesus choose that word? Because he knows that there are going to be times when we don't want to keep going in the race. There's going to be times when we're getting tired. There's going to be times when we get discouraged. There's going to be times when we don't want to push through and we don't want to run the race that God wants us to run. And what Jesus is saying is just hang in there. Just stick with it. You're going to be okay. And this idea of endurance and this idea of perseverance is all through the Bible. But I'm going to show you three passages here. Hebrews chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. And we don't know who the Hebrew writer is, but he's saying, and we, all of us, we desire that each one of you demonstrate the same diligence, to stick-withedness, so as to realize the full assurance of hope until the end. We hope till the end. We look forward to the end so that we don't become sluggish. And this isn't New King James, but I like the word sluggish because sometimes we get in our lives, we get a little sluggish as Christians. But instead, be imitators of those who through faith and endurance inherit the promises. Be like those who've gone on before us. Be like those who have endured. Be like those who have remained faithful until the end. Hebrews 3:14 says, for if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed. Think back to when you first became a Christian. How excited were you when you started hearing the word? How excited were you when you realized salvation was in your hands because of what God has done for you? He's saying, go back to that time. Stay faithful. Stay like that. Stay motivated that whole way. I know the race is long, but the energy that you had in the very beginning of the race, keep that energy going even when you get towards the end, so that we will share in all that belongs to Christ. That's our inheritance. Endurance, perseverance, patience. We have to be able to overcome. We have to be able to stay in the race. We can't quit. We can't give up. And we have to run as if we want to win. And this is where I put my after I was looking for pictures when I ran across this statistic, and that's why I just added it there at the bottom. That's a high non-completion rate, which is very surprising to me. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 through 4. If you remember Hebrews 11, we just looked at Hebrews 12 a few weeks ago. But Hebrews 11 is talking about all these men and women of faith. And the Hebrew writer then says in verse 1, therefore, since we have been surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. And the point that I made a while back was we look at all of those Old Testament heroes of faith, but we've also got individuals on the back that Tom put up as a great cloud of witnesses. People that have been in our lives, and that's some of them, but we all have individuals. Maybe it was our parents. Maybe it was our grandparents. Maybe it was our aunts or our uncles or family members or people who have lived a life, who have lived a faithful life to God. And what the Hebrew writer is saying, we have all of these people that have done it. You can do it too. So strip off every weight that slows you down. Be prepared for this race. Be prepared for this run. Especially get rid of the sin that easily trips you up. If I have a problem with a specific type of sin, I need to realize that I have that problem and don't let myself be tempted by that. Don't put yourself in situations that you'll be tempted by that. And then he says, going back to the running analogy, and then let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. Let us run the Christian life that God has set before us. And we do this, we run like this, by keeping our eyes on Jesus, keeping our focus on Jesus. And why can we do that? Because Jesus is the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Our salvation only comes through Jesus. But he continues in verse 2. Because of the joy awaiting him, and that him should be capitalized, because of the joy awaiting Jesus, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. And in verse 3 he says, think of all of the hostility, think of all of the bad things that happened to Jesus. Think about how he endured all of the things that he endured. And when we think about what Jesus endured, he says, then you won't become weary and give up. When we think about what Jesus did for us, that should be an encouragement to us, a motivation to us to keep going on our Christian journey. And then he says in verse 4, and after all, you have not yet given your lives in the struggle against sin. He said, you didn't die like Jesus died. You didn't have to give up your life like Jesus gave up his life. And Paul, as he's getting ready to leave this life, as he has finished his race, as he's finished his fight, and he's writing to Timothy, and again, as we mentioned in Bible class, this is specifically to Timothy, but it's also to all of us. Paul says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Paul is saying, I stayed faithful to God my entire life. And I see the finish line. I see the end is in sight. And Paul is saying, I gave up everything I could. I ran my race as if I was trying to win the race. And he does that because he knows that laid up for him is a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, which God, the righteous judge, will give me on that day when God returns. And not only to me, he's saying not just to him, but also to all who have loved his appearing. In essence, Paul is saying, you fought the good fight. Finish the race. Finish the course. Stay faithful to God. And when you do, your prize, your reward, is not because you finished first, but it's because you finished. Because you stayed faithful. And so my message this morning is this. Where are you in your Christian race? Where are you in your Christian life? Are you a spectator? Are you standing along the sideline knowing other people who are Christians, like Colin Cowherd, and saying, hey, go get them. I support you. I've got your back. But I'm not going to join you. I know that morning, maybe I'm just remembering incorrectly, but it was cold. It seemed like it was cold. And I know there were hundreds, maybe thousands, or maybe 1,000 of participants. But I also know that the vast majority of the people in Port Isabel on that day were not in the race. And just like that Christian race, that Christian journey that we go through in our lives, the vast majority of the people in this world are going to be spectators. But if you've been called to be a part of that journey, to be a part of that race, then you have to run. We have to give maximum effort. We have to fight the good fight, to do everything we can to win. And again, I'm not saying you win, you earn your salvation. Please don't misunderstand me on that. But we have to stay the course. We win when we finish. When we win when we don't give up. We win when we stay faithful. And Jesus chose the word endure and perseverance and patience and overcoming because he knew that this life was going to be difficult. He knew that your journey with him is not easy. But he's saying, just hang in there. Because we don't earn our salvation, we just have to stay the course. We have to stay faithful to God. But knowing what God has done for us, we've got to give maximum effort. We've got to run to the best of our ability. Because if we take it easy, or if we want to coast, or if we want to be just part-time Christians, then it's going to be too easy to get sidetracked. It's going to be too easy to get off course. I don't think I can make an analogy because the course here was super well laid out, but I've heard of people running marathons who get off the course. They run and it's so far, it's 26 miles, and they're like, oh, we start running this way. Well, don't run that way. Stay the course. Finish the race. And when you finish the race, when you finish the Christian journey, you win. When you're faithful to God, you win. And while it may be difficult at times, God's there with us. Jesus is there with us. We have examples of other individuals who finished the race, who finished the course, who are our faithful cloud of witnesses. So wherever you are this morning, hopefully you're in the race, hopefully you're trying, hopefully you're doing everything you can to finish, to get to the finish line with maximum effort. But if you're not, we do offer an invitation. Put on Christ in baptism. Give your life to God. Die to yourself and live to Christ. You can do that this morning as Danny leads us in an invitation song.
If it's convenient for you.